If you saw the color footage of Coltrane in the studio, that is exceedingly rare. There are many photos of Coltrane in the studio, but no known film. So I was at the house of a world-class photographer named Chuck Stewart, and I didn't want just the record cover photos that he's known for. He shot Coltrane more than any other photographer. I wanted to see his negatives. I wanted to see his contact sheets. And so we're going through a stack about this tall, and I come across this photo, and I must have said something like, "Oh shit." And Dave Harding, my producer, was next to me. He said, "What is it?" And I said, "Look at this photograph." And he said, "It's like Coltrane and some guy in the studio, so what?" And I said, "Look what the guy is holding in his hand." He said he was holding a Super 8 movie camera. Chuck remembered that it was a world-class bass player named Art Davis, and so we put our researcher Kiku on this, and sadly Art had passed away in 2007, but his son lives in Van Nuys, California. And we called him up and said, here's who we are and what we're doing. And he said, "Oh yeah, I got all the home movies in the garage." And he hadn't looked at them since his dad passed away. They're all in a box. So Dave went out there for about 3 weeks and Saturdays, and a lot of Ma and Pa and Grandma and Grandpa and the grandkids kind of movies. But then he found it. It was a 7.5-minute color roll of film of Coltrane in the studio. No sound. But there's the film, and we love doing that in our documentaries. We're always, I call it the treasure hunt. We're always looking for treasures like that. And so we were really thrilled to have it, and thrilled that the family allowed us to use it. The gentleman is asking a question about, it was the very first recording that Coltrane made in 1946 when he was 20 years old. And everyone's talking about how bad it is. This gentleman thought it wasn't so bad. I thought it was great when Wynton Marsalis says, you know, he really isn't playing that well. And it's great to consider that he actually started there, and to imagine how far he went is amazing, that he really did. But that recording was made in 1946. And Coltrane did not take it home with him. One of the other musicians that day took it home, and it sort of wandered around Florida for decades. And we finally found a guy that had the recording and had the photographs of the actual session. And he was very kind enough to share them with us, and that's what they are. I mean, I find, just as I've done a lot of docs on musicians, I'm always sort of fascinated what they sound like really, really early in their career. And I, not to disagree with you, but I think that the people that have observed sort of say the same thing, that some musicians pop out fully formed. Coltrane was not one of those. And I think what you see is a musical journey that Coltrane made, that he's like a sponge. He's absorbing pieces and techniques and all kinds of interesting skills from the various people he worked with, whether it's Dizzy Gillespie or Miles Davis or whomever. And then finally, when he gets off the stuff, when he kicks his addiction, all of that knowledge has now come to be sort of simmering in the pot, and it explodes with flavor. And I think that's just something to be admired. I think that's a great, great thing. So when I approach a subject here, like Coltrane, about whom I did not know as much as I should have, I'm very curious. But it's all about the story. What's the story, and how do you tell the story? Mm-hmm. And so I just felt he's a different kind of musician with a different kind of story. And that's why we spend a lot of time on his spiritual journey, a lot of time on his personal journey, and not so much talking technically what he was doing on the saxophone, because I think maybe 5 people would have gone to see that movie. But this one, it's like peeling away layers of an onion to see what's underneath. What did you all think of the paintings?
Right. Nice.
Thank you very much. We have, one of the challenges we had with Coltrane is that there were some important stories in his childhood that we wanted to tell, but we had no materials with which to tell them. No photographs, no films. What were we going to do? And then we came across this wonderful book called Spirit Seeker, which was a book for children ages 6 through 9. That's about John Coltrane, written by a guy named Gary Golio, and the paintings inside were done by Rudy Gutierrez, who is a New Jersey-based artist, and I fell in love with them. And so we tracked Rudy down, and we made a deal with him. And so what you see, for example, when all the men in Coltrane's life passed away, we had nothing to illustrate it with, but Rudy had done a beautiful painting. There are a number of other things, and then we decided we loved him so much we wanted him to be our poster for the film. And so when you see the poster for the film outside the theater, that's also Rudy's. But if I can follow up and say, she said, hats off to our clearance person for all the music. Yeah. There are 48 songs, 48 Coltrane recordings, including the first one, in this film. We have an arrangement with the family, we have an arrangement with the labels, so we were able to include this much music. But I wanted to sort of share with you our thought here was not to put the music in chronological order. It was not to draw attention to any one piece of music except when we felt that was necessary, when we're talking about My Favorite Things or Love Supreme or Alabama. But I wanted it to be as if John Coltrane were still alive, and I had gone to him and I said, John, I would like you to score this film. We have a scene here that's emotional. We have a scene here that's dramatic. We have a scene here that's poignant. We have a scene here that's a little funny. And in his extraordinary body of work, I found every mood, every tone, every emotion that we wanted to underscore a particular scene or sequence with. And that's the genius of this man. There's so much great, great stuff. Question is, did we discover any statements or insights from Coltrane that were political? I think his stepdaughter, Antonia, said it best, that he was born in the Jim Crow South. He certainly experienced discrimination and all of those things. And I am sure that when he was playing with Miles Davis, that when they were on the road, there were certain hotels they could not get rooms in. So I think he was certainly exposed to all of that. The thing that struck me about Coltrane when I was doing my research is he was able to, in some amazing way, shut out the world around him and not pay attention to those sort of workaday things, but keep his eyes on his prize, which was, I love what Sonny says, there's the little picture and there's the big picture, and I think Coltrane was always about the big picture. And he didn't so much talk or write about politics as he put it into his music. And I think we hear that in Alabama, which is why we spent so much time on telling that story. It's a masterwork, that piece. And I think his special relationship with the people of Japan and wanting to go to Ground Zero where the bomb was dropped. We, as you could see, we went there and we shot there, and it's a very emotional place, very moving place. And I think what one can say about John Coltrane is that he was very sensitive artist. And I think he internalized many of these things and didn't talk. You heard Benny Golston, who's great. I did a Q&A with him last week in New York when the film opened. But when he says Coltrane was so quiet, everyone else around him had to talk. The only time he talked was when he put the horn in his mouth. And I think that's really the key to understanding him, is that it came out through his music, not so much through his writing or his words. Good question. Thank you. Yes, sir.
How did you find that enthusiastic fan in Japan, and when you found him, how did you feel?
Question is, how do we find enthusiastic fans in Japan? Now you're touching on something I'm embarrassed to tell you. There's another aspect of this film that unfortunately for time we had to cut out. It's the thing that kills us the most as filmmakers, where you have a really good idea and it's there, but it's just too long. And we've got to do it so that you're not going to get too restless or feel bored. So we want to stay at a certain length. So we had shot 4 stories of Coltrane fans whose lives had been dramatically transformed by their passion for Coltrane's music. And the only one that has survived is Fuji. Did y'all like Fuji? I heard you laughing in all the right places. Yeah. So, to find him was really just amazing. But it wasn't so hard. Everybody in Coltrane world knows him. Because he's always, do you have any new photographs? Any this, any that? He's like constantly in people's faces trying to get things. And he does have this huge collection. So we went to Japan to tell his story and the story of Coltrane going there for Nagasaki. But we had 3 other stories. There's a lovely story about a school teacher in the New York public school system who started a program called Kids for Coltrane. And it's for kids 6 to 12. And she uses the story of John Coltrane and his music to fire the creative imaginations of her students. So if this kid from North Carolina could accomplish all of this, what can you accomplish? And it's a lovely program. It was a sweet little story. Killed us to cut it out. Just killed us. Second story was there was a guy who at age 16 became obsessed with Coltrane. And his question was, what was it about Coltrane's brain that enabled him to think so differently, to compose this music and to play this music? And he became one of the leading brain researchers in the country. And he studies a lot about music, and we had a beautiful sequence about how he was using Coltrane's music to make some connections and show how the brain functions.
Wow.
That had to go. And then we had a very moving, very emotional story about a Vietnam vet who came home addicted to hard drugs. And one day he found a record player. And then somehow somebody gave him a Love Supreme, the album, and he put it on and he said, my life changed forever. Like Coltrane, he went cold turkey, he got clean, and now he ministers his own church in Cleveland and ministers to former drug addicts and ex-cons. And it's a very powerful story, and the only thing I could say is it really hurt us to cut these, and it's why God invented DVD bonus material. We hope you'll get the DVD when it comes out later in the summer. One of the lessons for me about Coltrane is he followed his vision. It didn't matter what other people thought, what critics thought, what even some of his fellow musicians thought. He sort of knew where he wanted to go or was constantly trying to get somewhere. And I think that's a great role modeling thing for kids and for all kinds of people. And so we're going to be in theaters now for the next 2 months. We're 90, as of Friday, we're in 97 screens across the country, which is great. We're going to start reaching out and trying to see if we can find some connection to schools so that we can reach out to some of the children. That would be really nice. The gentleman was asking about his journey and various aspects of being in isolation or responding to pain in his life. Just based on the films I've done, the great artists are very much byproducts of their childhood, first and foremost. And I think, as Dr. West said, he was only 12 years old when he lost all those male figures and his grandmother. And how do you respond? And I think that's really true, and it speaks to who he is as a person, that he was able to go in the directions that he did, that he had the strength and the courage to do that. But we all are impacted by things that happen to us in our lives along the way. Yeah. I think what seems remarkably consistent about him is his courage and his persistence of vision. Yes, he fell far from the spiritual tree for a while, but then he came back. And generally, it's always he knew where he was going. What I will say is a number of people have asked questions about where Coltrane might have gone had he lived beyond 40. And I think, sort of following up on your question, with all the things that were influencing him in the world, the politics, the psychedelic 60s, who knows where he would have gone, but I suspect that we would still be sitting here talking about the remarkable giant steps that he had taken in his life.